Truth Espresso, episode 313.
He's promising a bloodbath.
A bloodbath.
If he loses, in his word.
Donald Trump has openly vowed if reelected, he'll be a dictator on day one.
A dictator on day one.
All he said was, it's not that serious. Just inject a little bleach into your arm. You'll be all right.
Just inject a little bleach into your arm.
Americans aren't stupid. He was talking about a bloodbath. Sometimes a bloodbath means a bloodbath.
Americans aren't stupid.
Well, hey there, friends, family, foes, and lurkers alike. This is your host, Daniel Minnick, for another exciting episode of Truth Espresso. And I think this episode might be a real treat to you if you have been into major politics over the years. The last time I dealt with the subject of Donald Trump was with the series on Manhattan Madness, the New York Trump trial, and I try to be somewhat balanced and open to criticism. I am by no means a fanboy of Donald Trump. Now, do I think he faces some people who dishonestly want to undo him, that threaten really bad things that could happen to this country, and that however bad he might be, that I think that might be a little overblown, and that those who want to do him harm might have ideas for this country that could be pretty much pure evil and turn this country into some form of third world wasteland, then yeah, I might lean a little more toward Donald Trump over many of his enemies here. And what's interesting, what actually inspired this episode and other ones in this series, did Trump really say that? Is a conversation that I had with my coworker. Just like my series, Was Jesus a Socialist?, was inspired by a conversation with the same liberal Democrat coworker. So this one was, and it was inspired because he came in one morning after the Trump-Harris debate, and he asked me what I thought about it, and I tried to be honest about who I thought got points for style and stuff, and I gave that to Kamala Harris toward the end of our conversation because he really wanted to emphasize the statements from Trump about they're eating the dogs and they're eating the cats, which, you might have heard that hit song that was made from that. And he would emphasize how Trump lies a lot on the stage. And so therefore, why shouldn't we consider him the major threat? And that Trump believes everything that he sees on TV, and that's why he was promoting the Haitian immigrants that were basically federally moved into Springfield, Ohio, and added a third of the population of that small town. And as there were some reports, there was a police report where someone said that they were like eating geese, and so various other kind of unconfirmed, admittedly, reports. We don't know what all is going to come out of the mess that's going on in Springfield, Ohio. So sure, can I say that maybe Trump jumps the gun when there are rumors about something, and maybe he should wait until it's more confirmed before he says it in a debate? Sure, that wasn't his shining moment there, and it gets a laugh from the other side who focus so much on there's nothing wrong with taking anyone from any other country and bringing them here. It's just culture shock to bigots. But, every country has problems, including the United States, and every country even has criminals, including the United States. But when you have gangs coming from other countries, or you have people like that are known for practicing voodoo, it can be believable, to some extent, even if we don't take people's word without confirming it first that they're doing specific things. So I don't want to really drone on about that particular question. But what inspired this episode was after that and accusing Trump of lying during the debate. And so then I brought up the challenge that Kamala Harris had told quite a few lies during the debate, and the moderators didn't fact check her about that. And of course, my coworker wanted to know what those are. So I said she once again brought up the Charlottesville very fine people hoax, and he believed the narrative about that somehow Trump was referring to neo-Nazis and white nationalists as very fine people. The incident about that was 7 years ago as of this recording. And so it's been 7 years, and there are people who still believe that he was referring to white nationalists, white supremacists as very fine people. And so one would think that all it should take is simply to watch the video of what he said with enough context. But the challenge is that you have mainstream media outlets that like to take snippets of things and of events and then try to get their viewers to infer things from it. So they imply a meaning to things, and they seem to like to do that with this particular man, Donald Trump, more than other people. So this episode is about the question, did Trump really say that? Because there's been a lot of things attributed to Trump over the years, ever since he announced his candidacy back in the 2016 campaign, that have endured for years. And then there are some that are more recent. And so I want to go through a list of things that are attributed to him via media, and then find out, did Trump really say that? So the first one that I want to tackle is the classic one. It's the Charlottesville very fine people hoax. And so on August 15th, 2027, you have Trump referring to the two sides of this incident in which there was a lot of protesting and violence over removing the Robert E. Lee statue and renaming the park there. And here's often the snippet that you will hear from that particular conference.
But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
So, if your understanding of the opposing sides that happened there were that, because there were lots of reports and pictures constantly showing the neo-Nazis, the white nationalists, holding the torches, chanting anti-Semitic remarks, and, David Duke, I believe he's the Grand Wizard of the KKK, also being there. All these people on this one side here who are protesting these changes being made, removing the Robert E. Lee statue, because, of course, Robert E. Lee was a Confederate general, and so there are mixed viewpoints about him. And I'm not going to get into that, but people believe that since he supported and he fought for the South, the Confederacy, that we should just simply condemn him and remove a statue. We should no longer commemorate him as a great general. And then you have other side, people who did not want that to happen, don't like changing history or removing history. So what did Trump say in context, where you have the part where he says, and you had very fine people on both sides? So let's listen to what the mainstream media and Trump's critics, including President Joe Biden and now Vice President Kamala Harris, have also pushed that Trump meant.
And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. Now, in the other group also, you had some fine people, but you also had troublemakers, and you see them come with the black outfits and with the helmets and with the baseball bats. You had a lot of bad people in the other group too.
Treated unfairly, sir. I'm sorry. I just didn't understand what you were saying. You were saying the press has treated white nationalists unfairly.
No.
I just didn't understand what you were saying.
No. There were people in that rally, and I looked the night before. If you look, there were people protesting very quietly the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. I'm sure in that group there were some bad ones. The following day, it looked like they had some rough, bad people. Neo-Nazis, white nationalists, whatever you want to call them. But you had a lot of people in that group that were there to innocently protest and very legally protest because, I don't know if you know, they had a permit. The other group didn't have a permit. So I only tell you this. There are two sides to a story. I thought what took place was a horrible moment for our country, a horrible moment. But there are two sides to the country.
So we see here that Trump actually did say, I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and white nationalists. They should be condemned totally. So why don't we see that very often, if at all, in the reports about him saying there were very fine people on both sides? So if Trump says, I'm not talking about those groups, then how are we to understand that if we have white nationalists and neo-Nazis on one side and plain old normal people on the other side who want to get rid of the relics of the Confederacy and slavery on the other? They want to tear down the Robert E. Lee statue and rename the park because we got to get rid of that blight in U.S. history. And so it's them versus a bunch of white nationalists and freaks with torches who were willing to commit violence to prevent this stuff from happening. So Trump said that the neo-Nazis and white nationalists should be condemned totally. So what? That means there's only one side left, right, to support. But Trump says there were very fine people on both sides. So who are these very fine people? And this is where the media has imported a definition that when Trump said very fine people on both sides, that he's trying to say that particularly of note, the extremists of the neo-Nazis and white nationalists, that somehow they were very fine people. But Trump excludes them. And Trump belabors the point to try to say that there were extremists on both sides. But there were people, he repeatedly said this, there were people who were there, and that the media doesn't give him credit for it. There were people who were there on both sides of the issue who were not among the extremist groups. He mentions that there were extremists on the other sides who were the ones with the black outfits and with the helmets and with the baseball bats. He then said, you had a lot of bad people in the other group too. So from Trump's description, these sound like Antifa types. So what's going on and what was Trump talking about when he referred to the two sides? There were two sides present in the riot over the issue of tearing down the Robert E. Lee statue and renaming the park. One side wanted that to happen and the other didn't. Okay, we can all agree on that. Now, what Trump was making the point about was that among both sides were what Trump called troublemakers. Violent neo-Nazis and white nationalists were the extremists on one side, and violent Antifa types were the extremists on the other side. But then also, on both sides, there were very fine people who were not among the extremist troublemakers who wanted to make their voices heard about their side of the issue without causing trouble. Can't people have an opinion, a peaceful, decent opinion that we can't just be hasty to tear down a statue and rename a park, who think that history matters without being someone who wears a hood and a sheet? And can't there be people who have grievance who want to remove the statue because they believe it's a blight in history and that we shouldn't celebrate it, who are also very fine people who weren't among the violent Antifa types? That's the point that Trump was making. He also said that these particular fine people had a permit to be there for protesting and that they weren't intending to stir up violence. So, to recap, two sides, each side had very fine people and also had not so very fine people, the troublemakers. The one side had very fine people and also had neo-Nazis and white nationalists. The other side had very fine people and troublemaking Antifa types. So, Trump is correct that there were very fine people on both sides and not the extremists. But the media did not want the event to be portrayed that way, and Trump was trying to make sure that that got out there, that people who were very fine protesters there, who just had a simple grievance, weren't looking to cause any trouble, didn't have radical ideas, that they were recognized on both sides. Now, what's interesting is that Joe Biden began his 2020 campaign and he claimed that this particular incident, the Charlottesville incident, was why he threw his hat in the ring. So the current president that we have right now, as I record this, President Joe Biden, he is currently president now, and he had his 2020 campaign based on a claim about an event that doesn't seem to be true. So let's listen to a bit of Joe Biden's campaign video and what he claimed about what Trump said.
Charlottesville is also home to a defining moment for this nation in the last few years. It was there on August of 2017 we saw Klansmen and white supremacists and neo-Nazis come out in the open. Their crazed faces, illuminated by torches, veins bulging and bearing the fangs of racism, chanting the same anti-Semitic bile heard across Europe in the 30s. And they were met by a courageous group of Americans, and a violent clash ensued. And a brave young woman lost her life. And that's when we heard the words of the President of the United States that stunned the world and shocked the conscience of this nation. He said there were, quote, some very fine people on both sides. Very fine people on both sides? With those words, the President of the United States assigned a moral equivalence between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it.
So Joe Biden claimed that the two sides were just the neo-Nazis and white nationalists on one side and the courageous Americans who stood up to them on the other side. So when Trump said there were very fine people on both sides, according to Joe Biden, he was blatantly supporting the cause of the freaks and the ones who stood up to them. No, I don't think so. That doesn't make much sense. Did Joe Biden know the truth about what Trump said and who were in Charlottesville, and did he lie about it? Or was Biden ignorant about what Trump really meant? Now, either way is bad because Biden gave his campaign video about 2 years after the incident. That should be plenty of time. If he was simply ignorant, you would think he would do some much-needed research before making a professionally produced campaign video about it. So 2 years, and if you're going to make a campaign video and put clips in it showing the bad sides of things, and then you're going to claim Trump said something, you think you might do your homework. So while I might be willing to give him the benefit of the doubt on that, it's hard to do that when he clearly over and over and over again brings that up, even to this day. Even in his June 2024 debate with Trump, he brought it up again.
What American president would ever say Nazis coming out of fields carrying torches, singing the same anti-Semitic bile, carrying swastikas were fine people?
And Trump once again had to explain what actually happened. As much as I don't want to, it's hard to avoid the idea that Biden is simply being dishonest for political reasons. Now, even with my coworker, I had to show him the Snopes article. Snopes did take their precious time for years letting this claim make its rounds and letting people on the other side milk it for all it's worth before releasing its report about it on June 20th, 2024. So it took them almost 7 years. They should have done this back in 2017, where it belonged, but hey, I'll still give the props to Snopes finally for saying and rating this claim false. So, when Trump said there were very fine people on both sides, was he talking about neo-Nazis and white nationalists? Clearly not. So on this one, I say hoax
Busted.
Andrew Rappaport's Rap Report is a podcast providing biblical interpretations and applications. It is a ministry of Striving for Eternity and part of the Christian podcast community. We provide a biblical view of cultural events, discuss how to apply God's Word to the Christian life, address issues that concern the church, and we even take some time to offer a correct understanding of those commonly misinterpreted passages of Scripture. You will hear from great guests like Justin Peters, Todd Friel, J. Warren Wallace, and Gabe Hughes. Andrew has the Rap Report Daily, which is a 2-minute Monday through Friday podcast, and then the longer Rap Report podcast for more content. Subscribe to both today by searching for Rap Report on any podcast app, spelled R-A-P-P Report, or click the podcast link at strivingforeternity.org.
Now, the next one is the Trump called immigrants animals and not people. And I've heard this one a lot. In fact, if I recall correctly, months ago, as of this recording, my coworker, who seems to want to bring up frequently to me the idea that Trump and anyone who might prefer that he actually win rather than the Democrat candidate, that somehow they have xenophobia. That Trump and people who might think a little like him, somehow they want America to be white and nothing but white. And we shouldn't have immigrants because they're weird and they're different and they might have some different cultures, and we want to keep that out of our pure white America. So let's play the frequently shown clip where Trump seemed to call immigrants crossing the southern border, mostly from Latin American countries, animals and not people.
We have people coming into the country, or trying to come in. We're stopping a lot of them. But we're taking people out of the country. You wouldn't believe how bad these people are. These aren't people. These are animals. And we're taking them out of the country at a level and at a rate that's never happened before.
So there you go, clear as mud, right? Trump has xenophobia, and he just bold-facedly refers to people of different ethnicities, particularly Hispanic types, animals, and not people. And yet somehow he served out a 4-year term as president and then almost won 2020. And now he seems to be slated in some polls right now to likely win 2024. And so what's wrong with this country if there's enough people who's going to support a candidate who clearly thinks that people other than his precious Americans of European descent are just animals and not people? So now, what was the context of this clip? Perhaps if we hear some more of it, we might understand what Trump was actually talking about. Did Trump really call immigrants animals and not people? So when he said these remarks, it was May 17th, 2018. And he was meeting with a bunch of sheriffs who were concerned about their difficulties in having to deal with illegal immigrants. Not just illegal immigrants, but they mostly pointed out ones who were actually committing violent crimes. A woman sheriff complains to Trump that ICE, the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, is the only law enforcement agency that can't use local criminal databases and have limited rules for dealing with the border.
But now ICE is the only law enforcement agency that cannot use our databases to find the bad guys. They cannot come in and talk to people in our jail unless they reach a certain threshold. They can't do all kinds of things that other law enforcement agencies can do. And it's really put us in a very bad position. It's a disgrace.
And we're suing on that, and we're working hard, and I think it'll all come together. Because people want it to come together. It's so ridiculous. The concept that we're even talking about it is so ridiculous. We'll take care of it, Margaret.
Thank you. There could be an MS-13 gang member I know about. If they don't reach a certain threshold, I cannot tell ICE about them.
Be an MS-13 gang member I know about.
We have people coming into the country, or trying to come in. We're stopping a lot of them. But we're taking people out of the country. You wouldn't believe how bad these people are. These aren't people. These are animals. And we're taking them out of the country at a level and at a rate that's never happened before. And because of the weak laws, they come in fast. We get them, we release them, we get them again, we bring them out. It's crazy. The dumbest laws, as I said before, the dumbest laws on immigration in the world. So we're going to take care of it, Margaret. We'll get it done.
After Trump says they're suing and that they'll take care of it, she further complains that even if she is aware of an MS-13 gang, she isn't allowed to inform ICE with certain thresholds being met. So that's when Trump, in the context of talking about dangerous international gangs, says of them, these aren't people, they're animals. He wasn't even talking about the average illegal immigrant in this context. He wasn't talking about the poor people who are trying to claim asylum and they know that it's wrong for them to do that, but they're desperate. And, you might have a poor mom with some poor kids and they're trying to find a better life for themselves. And they're trying to take the quicker road to getting that. And, we can all recognize that's understandable. There might be ways for them to do that more properly. But that's not who Trump was talking about. He was clearly talking about violent cartels and gangs and assuring this distraught female sheriff that he's aware of the problem that she is experiencing with the border laws being deficient and arresting or deporting violent gangs. Particularly mentioned, and what Trump is referring to after she mentions it, is the MS-13 gang. Now, according to Wikipedia, the MS-13 gang was even harming other migrants at the border. The article also details all the murders that MS-13's members have committed over the years, over the decades, along with child trafficking operations. So these are people who are constantly committing crimes. In fact, their mode of operation, their purpose for existing is to commit crimes, violent crimes, kill people, do nasty things to children. So these people is what this woman sheriff are referring to, and it's these people that Trump says of them, these aren't people, they're animals. And he's understandably saying this kind of to assure this sheriff that he recognizes the grave danger that these people impose and that he wants to make sure that the border's more secure and that they have everything they need, that perhaps the law can be changed so that ICE can do more than the laws are limiting them to be able to do, instead of having to reach certain thresholds and say, well, we can't handle this unless they do even more than they currently do. So, did Trump refer to immigrants as animals and not people? Well, he did refer to certain ones, and these certain ones were violent international gangs who murder people and traffic children.
Together, we're going to restore safety to our streets and peace to our communities. And we're going to destroy the vile criminal cartel MS-13 and many other gangs. But MS-13 is particularly violent.
MS-13 is particularly violent.
They don't like shooting people because it's too quick. It's too fast. I was reading one of these animals was caught and explaining they like to knife them and cut them and let them die slowly because that way it's more painful and they enjoy watching that much more. These are animals.
This shows that Trump, once again, at least not in this particular instance, is not racist. He's not a white nationalist like the claim is. So, hoax busted.
Ever wish you could get together with a friend over coffee each week and talk about God's Word? Me too. Hi, I'm Anthony Russo. I'm the host of Grace and Peace Radio. Grace and Peace Radio is a Christian living blog and podcast dedicated to engaging conversations about applying God's Word to everyday life. I hope you'll join me, Anthony Russo, on Grace and Peace Radio each week at graceandpeaceradio.com or right here on the ChristianPodcastCommunity.org.
Now, our next question, did Trump really say that, comes in the form of what was going on in the delightful year of 2020 when people were locked in their homes and had to wear masks. Now, this happened before the mask mandates, so in the spring of 2020, where Trump would have his daily conferences to try to discuss measures and progress and policies related to dealing with the virus. And on April 23rd, 2020, we have the comments and the questions that Trump said that quickly turned into the idea that Trump encouraged people to drink or inject bleach into them to kill the virus. But what did Trump really say here? So let's listen to the clip.
So I asked Bill a question that probably some of you are thinking of if you're totally into that world, which I find to be very interesting. So supposing we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light, and I think you said that hasn't been checked, but you're going to test it. And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. And I think you said you're going to test that too. Sounds interesting. Right, and then I see the disinfectant, where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number of the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that. So that you're going to have to use medical doctors with. But it sounds interesting to me. So we'll see. But the whole concept of the light, the way it kills it in 1 minute, that's pretty powerful.
So this clip comes off the heels of Trump having just heard talk about the science of how the virus gets killed by things like ultraviolet light. So based on scientific statements about how ultraviolet light kills viruses like the C19, and we'd also see, as we eventually start purchasing things like Clorox wipes, there was a time where it was hard to get Clorox wipes and to get hand sanitizer and to get toilet paper for that matter. Once we got certain sprays and disinfectants, they would have a new thing printed on it saying that it kills the virus, kills 99.9% of the virus. And based on the statements that Trump heard were being talked about, different things that we know that these different things kill it within a minute, ultraviolet light and disinfectant. Trump was wondering if there was some way to harness that knowledge and of how that works such that it could be injected into the body, as he said. He then asked about the disinfectant. So first he was asking about ultraviolet light based on what he had just heard. And then he asked about what he said was the disinfectant because certain things could also kill the virus. And Trump wondered if there were research into how something like that could be harnessed for the human body. Now think, Trump was dealing with a worldwide pandemic, and he wanted to explore all possible options. He actually wanted to get through this and to get out of this as quickly as possible. Now, why fault him for wondering if there was some way to take something that quickly kills the virus and to research if it can be injected to kill the nasty virus? Can't Trump wonder about something like that? He was asking questions. Now, is this the most intelligent thing he has ever said? No. Science is obviously not Trump's strong suit, admittedly. This was not his shining moment. I don't think anyone would look at this clip and say, yeah, this was the best Trump ever. Now, did Trump talk about injecting bleach? No. He never even mentioned the word bleach. Did he recommend that people inject bleach? Not even a hint of that. Or did he encourage anyone to drink bleach? No. Did he encourage or in any way suggest that anyone do any of this at all? No. He was asking scientists questions about how you just told me that ultraviolet light kills the virus within a minute. Is there a way that somehow we can harness that and inject that into the body? Whatever disinfectant he was talking about, I don't know. It could have even been bleach, or it could have been Clorox wipes or some other type of disinfectant. But he had just heard them talk about how on surfaces, if you use some disinfectant, it kills the virus just like the light very quickly. So he wants to know, have they researched, since we know what can kill it, has there been any research on how we can somehow harness that for the body? Now, once again, can we say that this was Trump's strongest moment? Of course not. But can someone ask questions who really wants to help people and wants a solution to kill the virus rather than just dragging things on and keeping people locked in their houses? I think we can give him some benefit of the doubt on that. Now, given that people talked about how certain things were known to kill the virus quickly, why can't a man dream? Why can't he wonder if anyone can research, which is what he said, some way to harness that ability to kill a virus inside a body? He didn't want to be a dictator and just keep everyone locked up. He hoped there could be a quicker way out of the pandemic. It seemed that the Democrats were more than happy to embrace a form of Stockholm syndrome and found an opportunity to criticize a leader wondering what could be the best way to help people. Now, the whole inject bleach thing evolved into something that sounds nothing like what Trump said, or rather asked about. In, as far forward as even the June 27th, 2024 debate between Trump and Biden, Joe Biden had this to say.
The pandemic was so badly handled. Many people were dying. All he said was, it's not that serious. Just inject a little bleach into your arm. You'll be all right.
So Joe Biden says, all he said was, it's not that serious. Just inject a little bleach into your arm. You'll be all right. How does that bear any resemblance to what Trump actually said? When we listen to the actual clip that we're talking about, did you hear Trump say it's not that serious? No. Did you hear Trump say just inject a little bleach into your arm? No. He didn't mention bleach. He didn't mention putting something in anyone's arm. He didn't suggest anything to anyone. He asked about research. And he didn't say bleach. He said disinfectant. And he didn't say, you'll be all right. No. None of what Joe Biden said in this debate has any resemblance to anything close to what Trump said. So this inject bleach hoax has persisted for about 4 years here, but I think we can agree. Hoax busted. Now, I think as we have seen what was actually said and what was claimed to have been said to score political points, scaremonger people into believing something about Trump or what he has said that is completely taken out of context and twisted and contorted. This is nothing new. This has happened in politics for years and in places of power for years. And I think it's fitting, when I saw in the scriptures, Psalm 35, verses 19 through 22, I'm in no way saying that Trump is like King David here, but I just think the language of what King David is talking about, how his enemies want to treat him, that there's a decent analogy here. So David says in Psalm 35, verses 19 through 22, "Let not them that are mine enemies wrongfully rejoice over me. Neither let them wink with the eye that hate me without a cause. For they speak not peace, but they devise deceitful matters against them that are quiet in the land. Yea, they opened their mouth wide against me, and said, Aha, aha, our eye hath seen it. This thou hast seen, O Lord, keep not silence. O Lord, be not far from me." So it seems that David is dealing with enemies. They hate him without a cause, like they don't like the fact that his existence and his desires threaten their cause, and so they're going to look for a way to trap him or to accuse him. And it says they speak not peace, but they devise deceitful matters against them that are quiet in the land. And I think a fitting analogy here is the fact that under Donald Trump, there were no new wars. In fact, it had kind of the most peaceful time in the 21st century. And yet, under George W. Bush, we had wars, certainly, but we see what side he seems to be kind of leaning toward. And then under all the Democrats, there seemed to be more violence and wars. And so those who are quiet in the land, the enemies want to devise deceitful matters against them. In other words, they're trying to claim something about them. They're making accusations that are deceitful. And King David says, they opened their mouth wide against me and said, Aha, aha, our eye hath seen it. And when it comes to these particular hoaxes about what Trump said, did Trump really say what they claim he said? Well, they'll take some words that he really said, but then they'll take away the context, twist it out of context, inject into his words something that they expect their listeners to infer from his words, something that he clearly did not intend. But then King David says, Aha, aha, our eye hath seen it. And when I talked with my coworker about the Charlottesville thing, he said, we hear what he said. He clearly said this. And I said, well, yeah, he said these words, but what did they mean in context? And I directed him to listen or watch the whole video. And I showed him the Snopes article. So people could say, aha, aha, our eye hath seen it. But King David says, thou hast seen, O Lord. So God, you see what the truth is. Now, God, please don't keep silence and be with me here. So I hope that you have enjoyed this episode. And if you've struggled with some of these particular things, these accusations, did Trump really say that? Well, in the Charlottesville very fine people hoax, immigrants, animals, and not people hoax, and the inject bleach hoax, that these are all hoaxes and that they were busted on this episode. So I hope that this episode is helpful, and we have plenty more of these hoaxes to deal with and ask ourselves the question, did Trump really say that? And so stay tuned for the next episode of Truth Espresso, and God bless.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Truth Espresso. Be sure to subscribe and rate it on your favorite podcast app. Truth Espresso is a member of the Christian podcast community. Check out other great faith-building shows at ChristianPodcastCommunity.org.